Hi, everyone. My name is Zachary Kilhoffer, and it's great to be here at PEPR once again. Today's panel tackles a question that is front and center for many of us. How can privacy engineers help to shape the coming wave of AI governance? I'd like to take a moment and to say what that means. Like privacy engineering, AI governance is a fast-evolving, cross-disciplinary field, somewhere between engineering, compliance, and ethics. Many in this audience will recall the scramble when GDPR passed, and suddenly everybody had to take privacy and data protection seriously. Doubtless, many of you are still dealing with these challenges, like, is there standard guidance for this? Could we automate that? How should we deal with requirements that conflict with one another? And who's going to try to explain the system architecture to legal? Last year, the EU AI Act passed. It is a messy behemoth of a bill, but it's set to do for AI governance what GDPR did for privacy. That is to say, raise the bar, spark a lot of confusion, and drive innovation. But just as privacy engineering is more than compliance, so too is AI governance. The stakes are high. The choices that we make are not just about avoiding fines, but also about building systems that people can trust. It's my belief that veteran privacy practitioners, and particularly the privacy engineers, are best positioned to tell AI governance folks like me what to expect and how to be effective in our jobs. So let's meet the panelists who are going to help us to explore how these hard-won privacy lessons can help to shape the future of AI governance. First is Hoang in the center here. He is the global head of privacy at Axon, with 20 years of experience building privacy and data governance programs. He's held senior roles at Google, Netflix, and Walmart, and he serves on the IAPP Privacy Engineering Advisory Board. Hoang is also a principal at Virtual Privacy, holds multiple privacy certifications, and is currently pursuing a Master of Laws. Next, Dr. Masooda Bashir is an associate professor at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, specializing in digital trust, cybersecurity, and data ethics. With roots in Silicon Valley, although she's now in the Silicon Prairie, she bridges technology and social sciences and helped to build UIUC's privacy program from the ground up. Dr. Bashir leads major National Science Foundation-funded privacy research and has published over 100 papers on privacy, cybersecurity, and human trust and automation. Dr. Sarah Lewis Cortes is a privacy engineering leader with over 20 years experience. Currently the head of privacy engineering, with over 20 years experience at firms like Netflix and Salesforce. She holds a PhD in cybersecurity, multiple industry certifications, and has led national privacy initiatives with NIST. Dr. Cortes' work spans privacy engineering, secure AI and machine learning, and law enforcement training, and she serves in the IAPP Privacy Engineering Advisory Board. Debra Farber, at the end here, is a privacy engineering leader with over 20 years experience, currently the head of privacy engineering at Lumin Digital. She has led privacy programs at Amazon, Visa, and IBM, and she advises privacy tech startups. Debra is also host of the Shifting Privacy Left podcast, serves on the PEPR programming committee, and is a passionate advocate for embedding privacy and ethics into AI and software development. Finally, Srivastava is a program and privacy leader with over 20 years of experience at firms like Meta, Amazon, FINRA, and Capital One. He led the industry's first ad tech privacy enhancing program at Meta, drove innovation in fintech and voice assistants, and he has impacted billions globally through these efforts. Aki is passionate about governance and ethics. He holds an MIT Sloan certification in AI for business strategy and was featured on Times Square in New York for his privacy contributions. Now, just a quick moment for housekeeping before we dive into our discussion. I want to say to the audience, there's going to be about 10 minutes for Q&A, so please be thinking about your questions, maybe who they would go to if you have any specifics. We also do, I personally prefer the flesh and blood humans to come up to the microphone if you would, but Slack is also an option. I'd also like to remind the panelists to keep your responses to about 2 minutes. And I'd also like to encourage you to respond to one another and just build off of each other's answers. This is just a conversation among friends, and ultimately the goal of that is to tell me how to do an AI governance job. So let's keep it conversational. So you can also just raise your hand if you do want me to acknowledge you specifically. So the first theme that I would like to cover is risk management for privacy and AI. Now, a lot of AI governance challenges are already becoming the responsibility of privacy engineers. This involves managing AI risks, which are typically a lot broader than those which are strictly about privacy. For example, when we think about privacy risk assessments, you can probably ignore existential risk. However, that is a legitimate concern for frontier AI model developers. So there's some different risk profiles here. So the first question I would like to address to Sarah, Sarah, why do you feel that it makes sense to manage privacy risks alongside AI risks, and what role should privacy engineers try to play in this?
Yeah, that's the question on everybody's mind, right? And in thinking about AI systems and implementation, one example that comes to mind that sort of drives home why it makes sense for privacy engineers to manage AI risk also is a common use case, which is customer support, right? Anyone here getting involved with using AI for customer support? It's really common, and it's one of the most common and most practical use cases. And one architectural aspect that I have found more than once is using multiple AI systems to feed into each other, right? And so a very common example of this is using speech to text to then feed into conversational analytics. And this is like a typical design architecture for a customer support AI system. But speech to text has a lot of notorious privacy problems. And so, using a privacy engineer who already has that background in understanding what are the privacy engineering challenges of using speech to text can be critical in ensuring that the entire workflow works. In addition, probably those of you who have encountered this know that there's a view that using speech to text to feed into conversational analytics can violate the Wiretap Act depending on the state in which it takes place, how many parties are party to the conversation, et cetera. So there are a lot of complexities that really devolve around privacy that exemplify why it makes sense.
So it seems like the actual engineering decisions are A, complex, and B, have a ton of overlap between what the privacy engineers were already dealing with, and that conveniently is now applied to new AI systems. Something like this.
Thank you, Zach. Indeed. Well put.
Thank you. No, would anyone like to pop in and say anything on top of Sarah? Hoang.
Yeah, I'm actually just very curious. Of the folks in this room, how many of you are doing both privacy and AI? Actually, quite a few.
A lot of hands.
That's great. Yeah, I just want to see that survey.
All right. No.
Okay, one thing
absolutely, Aki.
here is I would like to propose an experiment where privacy and AI risks could be considered in a single track, because anyways, the data retention or the model training, they are all having the dual consequences on the privacy and AI safety. So thinking in a single track could be a good experiment in the future.
Feels like there's a very large Venn diagram, which is getting increasingly complicated somehow, where we already had security and privacy overlapping, perhaps mostly, but not completely, and now we have an additional circle in this big Venn diagram for AI governance-y stuff, right?
Right.
Something like this. On the same topic, I'd like to address a question to Hoang here. Hoang, for privacy engineers who are taking on the risk management elements of AI governance, are there some specific challenges that they ought to be aware of in the next couple of years, and do you have any specific advice for them?
Yeah, no, I think absolutely. And this kind of go back to what you mentioned at the beginning, Zach, is you all remember when GDPR first rolled out, and there was a lot of confusion, right? Like, what does this really mean? When would it be effective? How we will comply with this? And I see that same wave of, confusion, frankly, for a lot of AI governance practitioner. And even if you look at the news today, AI Act rolled out last year, but already there's call to simplify certain part of it, like the disclosure. In the state, there is the call to a moratorium of 10 years on AI regulations. So imagine if you are an engineer working in that environment, like how are you going to get clear requirements, right? And I think as engineer, that's the one thing you really do want, clear requirements so that you can build your products on. So I think in the next few years, hopefully only a few, that will be the overall theme of the challenge for the engineers. And just to add to it, I think the other part too that you will also find challenging in your work is how do you convince stakeholders to start adopting these practices? Because to have regulations to point to and say you have to do it because the EU AI Act requires you to do so is a lot easier than sit down and talk about trade-offs with stakeholders when there's no law around it.
Thanks for that, Hoang. And I think you bring up something that's very important, which is this legal uncertainty that we're still coping with at the moment. I think many of us were expecting legal guidance from the European Commission on May 2nd, also from Senelec, which is kind of the NIST of Europe, sort of. I'm simplifying. But nevertheless, that advice was not forthcoming. We're still all waiting to understand. what parts that you AI to apply to us and how to actually do that stuff. But speaking of, I would like to address the next question to Debra. How do privacy engineers best handle privacy risks when they relate to legality and compliance and we're waiting on legal certainty?
Yeah.
How should we think about this?
Yeah, I mean, well, if you think about it, as someone who's worked in privacy for 20 years, before a lot of these frameworks and standards kind of came about, as long as you're focusing, like both AI and privacy are about focusing on the human and harms to the human and avoiding those harms and threat modeling and doing all of that. If putting the legal stuff aside, you want just good requirements that are going to embed AI governance into the organization. So you should just view it almost as like layering 3 life cycles on top of each other, right? First, you've got the product development life cycle, then you've got the data life cycle, and now you've got the AI governance life cycle. And you just kind of align, like even if you just created a matrix of like, just align what those requirements are, and and then start applying that to the organization and start, thinking about what are the potential harms and risks, not only to the organization, but primarily to the individuals. What regulators want to see is really, even in the time of uncertainty, once the stuff goes into effect, they want to see that you are, proactive, right? Privacy by design, but let's think of it also in terms of AI by design, like proactive in how you're applying these protections. You want to be risk aware, get a risk register to maybe be like, oh, okay, we identified we have these AI services, maybe an HR platform that does some uses AI for purposes of candidacy and hiring. Like maybe there's uncertainty there, put it in the risk register, but embed whatever you think is the right protections to, you're gonna have to just powwow amongst each other and get cross organizational understanding of what that means, of course, because it's not industry standard yet, but be risk aware, and then the lastly, be technically competent, right? Yeah. So that's how I would think about it.
Fabulous. Thank you, Debra. That actually, sorry, Masooda, please.
I just want to add that I think as an academic, we can use this legal uncertainty, the landscape, to really build a robust, scientifically rigor research portfolio for privacy engineering, right? This is really a great time for us to publish paper, right? Publish even models that don't necessarily work sometimes, or empirical validation of compliance, and contribute to open PD, open source tools, and kind of build a very rigorous and scientifically rigor field of privacy engineering for years to come. So shouldn't wait just for the legal landscape to guide us. We can guide ourselves in a lot of ways through research.
Thank you, Masooda. No, and I think that Debra also kind of transitioned already into our second topic. Now that we've solved risk management for both AI and privacy engineers.
Solved.
Solved, checkbox. So the next thing I'd like to talk about is a bit more about privacy by design, but for AI governance. Now, it's a little bit strange to say, I don't know, responsible AI by design or trustworthy AI by design or ethical or compliant or whatever we're trying to accomplish. I think it's still a little bit up in the air. There's a little bit of terminology confusion, right? But nevertheless, privacy by design is a super useful and common framework that privacy engineers leverage when they're building their privacy programs and they're trying to ensure that they have privacy-respecting products. And also connecting with the previous discussion, typically privacy by design includes an early and a rigorous approach to spotting and to trying to mitigate risks. So I wanted to address the next question to Aki. Aki, what challenges do you see in leveraging the privacy by design framework to guide responsible AI system development?
Yeah, in my opinion, privacy by design is a strong foundation, but clubbing it with the AI workflow brings unique challenges, right? For example, if we talk about the fine-tuning of the large language model with the user interaction log, in just a practical example, the data minimization is a moving target because we don't want to collect overly data, but we don't know how much data is supposed to be collected in this case. So the model training and the deployment becomes a little difficult. The reason is because the same user interaction log could be reused for improving the model performance, right? So how do we ensure that we are doing the right things? So in this case, what I propose here is, because it's non-static, keeping privacy by design, operationalizing it in such a way that it is a continuous control system, where for one of the example is if we can introduce the privacy reviews for the validation of the output of the model for any data leakage, or finding out the drift in the original intent of the data protection. In that way, we can still keep the concepts of privacy by design, but without having too much conflict. So these are the challenges, practical challenges that I have seen.
Thank you, Aki. I would also like to pose an additional question to Masooda. Masooda, a lot of your research focuses on how people view technology, and they think about its risks, and then they ultimately decide if they should purchase it because they can trust it, right? And there's all the time these new incredible AI technologies that are coming out, and companies maybe already are starting to struggle with adoption due to a lack of trust. So thinking about the companies that are developing big, new, cool AI tech, beyond privacy by design that we were just speaking about, beyond perhaps risk management we were just speaking about, what can companies do better to overcome distrust and to demonstrate trustworthiness, perhaps the trustworthiness of that product or of themselves as the company?
Thank you. Yeah, I think trust is a very fundamental component, an essential component of before using AI or any automated system. So I think companies that see trust or trustworthiness as a on-off switch only, or if they treat it as a compliance-only checkbox, are going to have the most difficult time. Trust is a process, and it's something that I built actually a theoretical model after looking at human-to-human interactions and how we trust, how we build trust. And so in this model, what we actually find is that trust is more complex and it's multi-layered. It's not just an on-off, you trust or you don't trust. Trust is built. And how we describe this in the model that I've developed, and actually although also have empirically validated by several studies that have been published, is that we look at the three models. The first layer is actually what we call the dispositional trust. And that trust is very much the first impression kind of thing, right? The gut feeling that you have before using a system or sitting in front of an AI tool in your background, lots of other things, does it impact you? And that's your first trial, right? You use it. And that is actually a lot of tools just kind of drop from that point. A lot of users just don't use it after that first interaction. If it's not a good and pleasant interaction, they drop the acceptance and they drop using the tool. So it's really important to design for that first layer of first impression, right? Users are not looking for perfect solutions. They're actually wanting you to be honest and for the AI tool to present and say, I know about this thing, but I don't know. So for example, a simple phrase that says, this is an AI assistant, this AI is your assistant, and it'll do a great job in drafting the first version, and then you are the expert, and you will actually perfect it or so. And that we've learned that those kinds of statements, those kinds of interactions for users really makes a big difference on how they trust. The second layer of my model that I've presented is actually situational trust. And that is, again, when the user actually gets to use the tool and there's a lot of back and forth and you learn to get comfortable with the tool. The third layer is actually the learned trust, and that's a long-term relationship that you build. You've used the tool now and you know how to use it. But even then you have like sort of a training wheels kind of mode where, again, the user gets to trust and use it under different kinds of and risky circumstances before they actually deploy it. So using these design strategies, I think, you can really build trust into your products with users rather than just saying it's an on-off compliance type of thing.
No, thanks for that elaboration. That was really helpful. Is there anyone who wants to give any quick life pro tips about being trustworthy as a company or making products that are trustworthy before we move on? All right. So the last thing that I would like to speak to y'all about that's, again, part of this like big, nice, but messy, overlapping Venn diagram of privacy engineering stuff and AI governance stuff concerns pets, technical controls, and how we can automate different aspects of AI governance. So compared to the field of security, privacy lacks the maturity of its technical controls, and it also lacks reliable, off-the-shelf tooling solutions in many cases. But AI governance is way less mature than privacy, and so we need to consider that at all. But in a nutshell, we can think about AI governance as trying to do the responsible thing and then also being able to prove it afterwards. But at present, it feels very manual and this very paperwork-heavy approach, and it seems like there might be less opportunity to use technical controls and ultimately to make things automated in a way that gives us some kind of assurance, right? Meanwhile, AI systems are getting more complex by the month, it seems. There's now multimodal architectures, there's agentic architectures that are kind of the new hype word, and this can make things very opaque. And the outcomes are typically probabilistic, which also makes things a little bit more difficult compared to normal software engineering. So, as we heard in yesterday's panel, pets can have the effect of increasing system complexity further, but they can potentially also be very nice tools for us. So, the question is, can we really use automation to help to manage things and to do AI governance well? So the first question I would like to specifically pose to Hoang. Hoang, what are some existing privacy techniques or tools or controls that privacy engineers and AI governance folks can think about for retrofitting or to just leverage for AI governance? And to what extent does that help us to automate stuff?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of opportunities out there. I know, as you mentioned, AI governance is a new space. So, with that discipline, the toolings and the product to support it are also developing. And I think there's a lot of exciting research to come out of there. But my philosophy in terms of this space, in terms of tech, has always been like, look at what you have already, right? If you really look at how the foundation of AI governance, which is the data and how you manage it, a lot of it you have through your privacy engineering program. Let's take a few examples. Let's take data catalog. How do you tag? How do you classify information? You've done it for privacy. Now, can you expand that tool to do the additional tagging, classification that will enable your AI governance program? That's one example. Another one, let's move it up a layer. In terms of disclosure, you've done disclosure for privacy all the time, all the cookie banners, right? So can you take that to think about model cards? How do you expand that? How do you take the infrastructure that you use to disclose privacy practices to disclose AI governance practices? So I think there are a lot of leverage opportunities. And I think actually one more I want to add, one of my favorite is synthetic data. So I think synthetic data has been used in the privacy engineering space in experimental way, but think about how you can use it for training data for AI. So summary, TLDR, look at what you have before you go and buy the shiny new things.
So I appreciate that, but I also do like shiny new things that offer us, great. No, so I'd like to ask you a quick follow-up question here. So I think that a lot of us are looking for solutions that help us to do stuff, especially when the new stuff is just difficult, and perhaps it seems, at least on its face, a little bit different than what we've currently been managing, right? So I want to be clear that I'm not trying to name and shame any products or organizations, but do you see the presence of, or perhaps just a risk of, sort of AI governance snake oil products, which perhaps have very large claims about what they're able to do and what to provide versus perhaps not so great capabilities when you really drill down into what they're offering? And is there something that you would offer to the folks who are looking for products that help them to do their job well in perhaps dealing with the uncertainty, the immaturity of these technical things we're dealing with?
Yeah, and I don't think a lot of it is malintention. I think a lot of it has to do, as I mentioned before, this is the new space, right? So I think everyone is trying to get into it. Everyone is trying their best to put out useful things for us to use. And if you have the resources, if you have the capacity to adopt new things, I don't blame you, but I would recommend do a gap assessment. Think about if you need to plug it in and unplug it, what does it look like to have that exit strategy, right? So that way you don't go too deep into your tech stack, because a really promising company nowadays with a really promising product might not get the funding they need and they might go kaput. Who knows, right? That's the pessimist side of me talking, but I would recommend treading in small step, think about it carefully, and have an exit plan.
Thanks so much for that, Hoang. The next question I'd like to direct to Sarah. Sarah, for a moment, could you speak about the techniques that you have used that you've implemented for anonymity? Because this is something that this crowd will be quite familiar with, and it's also something that might fit with AI system development. But how and where do you actually think about implementing this for maximum effect? And why should we think about it that way too?
Yeah, I love it when I'm asked about anonymity, Zach. So thank you very much. And I'd like to see a show of hands out here. Who out here has achieved anonymity for their organization's data? Any hands? Achieving true anonymity. Oh, wow, over here. Okay, brave
I'm
soul.
going to talk to you.
Right, okay, we'll talk later. The reason I ask is because, of course, achieving true anonymity is kind of the holy grail, but it's also virtually impossible. So I like to talk about data de-identification, right? Because under GDPR, if you do achieve true anonymity, right, then your data is exempt from many, although not all, of the provisions of GDPR. So, like, isn't that the holy grail? But stepping back from anonymity and talking about data de-identification, one of the tools that I like to use and talk about is our good old friend differential privacy, right? That, is not so old, but, nowadays it's like, kind of getting to be a more accepted, widespread tool that people are using. And so in the realm of AI, a question that I get a lot and that I've worked on implementing is, how can we use differential privacy to improve the data de-identification, the data minimization of AI, and where in the life cycle do you apply differential privacy? Differential privacy remains complex, difficult to implement, has a lot of challenges. And so, one of the key, things that I like to share with people is that differential privacy absolutely belongs in the AI development lifecycle, and it goes in the fine-tuning part of the cycle. You're not going to achieve data de-identification by using it in your original model training, but in fine-tuning, that's where it has a role. So that's the tip that I'd give for implementing.
Sarah, I'd ask you a follow-up. When you say in the fine-tuning part of the software development lifecycle for AI stuff, right, is that a lot of us probably use LLMs or build systems that have LLMs in there. Is that something that's specific to LLMs, or would that apply to any, a general purpose time series model or other types of machine learning as well? Or are you thinking specifically about the LLM use case here?
I mean, differential privacy can be applied, to all sorts of different products at different phases of the life cycle and different aspects of AI. But specifically with LLMs, it's that, a lot of us are fine-tuning models, right? We're taking models and just using them as is, but others of us are actually fine-tuning them and turning them into other models. So it's at that fine-tuning point that differential privacy is most correctly applied, I'd say.
Right.
Hope that answers
No,
your
absolutely. No, thanks for the clarification. I want to follow up by asking a question to Aki. Aki, when we think about things that we need to accomplish and when they conflict with each other, anonymity is one thing, and also transparency is on another hand, right? And one thing that we do need to very clearly accomplish when we're developing AI systems is explainability and transparency. No matter what standard or framework or law you're looking at, those are kind of part and parcel of this, right? So what role should privacy engineers play in shaping these explainability and transparency standards when they're working in this cross-functional team making AI stuff?
Yeah, awesome. Transparency is my favorite topic because ethics goes hand in hand with that. So in an ideal world, I would like to see privacy engineers not only be a guardian of data protection, but also be an advocate of users' right. For example, if there is any recommendation system that is built, we would like the users to give a right or to give them a tool that any content that is displayed to them, it is explained properly. There is some transparency. Of course, we cannot be fully transparent about the machine learning models, their architecture, because there might be some sensitive information in the parameter and weights. There might be some IP data. But one thing that we could be transparent about is what segment of the user data has been used to influence the model behavior or the outcome of that model. In that way, we'll give them a control or we'll give them the right that aligns with the GDPR as well. So as a privacy engineer, as a technology leader, we should make sure that we build the right technical controls to make it possible, right? One thing as a key takeaway here is I would like the privacy engineers to push for the data lineage transparency so that users are aware about how their data is used for any of the AI outcome.
Thanks for that, Aki. It sounds like the focus then is more about the data transparency,
Yes.
which is, correct me if I'm wrong, that's more about allowing people to exercise the rights pertaining to that data, right?
That's right.
But then there's more caution required perhaps when we are talking about
IPs, yeah.
Sure, but even like sort of just, what's under the hood? What does the architecture look like, right? Okay, so that does become a bit of a balancing act still, and what we're actually able to reveal and being transparent versus having a secure system that people can't game or whatever. But
I fully agree.
And is that simply a context-dependent thing that we need to cope with and learn as we go?
Yeah, that's what the focus should be, that we need to make a right balance where we are not sharing all the confidential details about the internals of models, but at the same time, we are keeping users at the center. We are making sure that they are fully getting what they are deserving.
Right. Thank you so much. Is any other quick follow-ups on that before we go to the audience Q&A?
I just want to mention that I think one of the challenging parts of applying privacy by design to AI governance is it's sort of like at the different opposite ends of the pole in a way, right? When we talk about AI, there's a need for lots and lots of data, right? Where privacy by design is data minimization is one of the first principles. So it's trying to fit into something that AI so far has been sort of a black box. Nobody really knows exactly how it does performance of optimization. So I think if we're going to apply privacy by design, it needs to be part of the built-in from the very onset of the product, and that it's part of the performance rather than just, again, a compliance checkbox. That's what I would mention.
Thank you. Yeah, please.
And I think since we're talking data, the one thing to Masooda's point, right? Like for AI, you need a lot of data. So I think when you think of data governance, the challenge will not just be internally within your company. I think you should think about the data governance from an industry perspective, because I think that's where we're heading. Like, what are the useful data within the healthcare sector, within the tech sector, within the public safety sector that's useful? And I think if you and your peers can start talking and aligning on what is safe data to use in that space, I think that could be a very fruitful conversation.
Absolutely. Thanks, Hoang. I think it's also just important to remember that AI systems tend to be data maximizing. They tend to get the best accuracy and best performance when you just throw it all in there, or at least that's often the strategy. So again, we have these sort of conflicting objectives that we're trying to reach and need to find some kind of working balance, which is messy and difficult in the real world. So now that we've solved everything, clarified everything, we will move on to a little bit of audience Q&A.